The day I walked back into Hargrove County, I told myself I was ready. I wasn't. You're never ready to walk into a room where your father is being celebrated by the same people who watched him destroy you. The Hargrove County Business Leadership Gala was held every January at the Whitfield Hotel, 12 floors of marble and brass, and people who had spent their whole lives learning how to shake hands without meaning it. The ballroom held 400. Every seat was taken. My father, Councilman Gerald Pruitt, was being honored with the Distinguished Civic Service Award, a crystal plaque the size of a small headstone, which felt appropriate. He had been chipping away at things for years. I stood at the entrance to the ballroom in my navy blazer and pressed slacks, my prosecutorial badge clipped to my hip the way it always was when I wanted to remind myself who I had become. The maitre d' checked his list twice when I gave my name. Voss. My married name. He didn't connect it. Nobody in this room knew me by Voss. In this room, I was still supposed to be the cautionary tale. My name is Ava. I'm 34 years old. 18 years ago, my father told me I was an embarrassment, packed a single duffel bag of my things, and drove me to the Greyhound station in Milford with $60 in a one-way ticket to anywhere. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look at me in the rearview mirror. He just put the car in reverse and left. Before I tell you what happened when he finally saw my face across that ballroom, let me ask you something. Have you ever spent years building yourself into someone unrecognizable, just so the day you walk back in, nobody can touch you? I was 16 when it started. Not the rejection, the setup for it. My mother had died the previous spring of fast and merciless ovarian cancer that took her in 4 months. My father, Wallace Pruitt, had grieved the way some men do, by replacing. By the time the school year started in September, there was a woman named Cecilia living in our house, wearing my mother's cardigan, drinking from my mother's coffee mug like she was trying to slip into a life that still had the shape of someone else in it. Cecilia had a son, a year older than me, from her previous marriage. My father thought this was an opportunity. I thought it was erasure. For 2 years I tried. I made myself small. I ate dinner without speaking. I got good grades because school was the one place where nobody could adjust my score to make someone else look better. My stepbrother, whose name I have worked hard to forget, got my bedroom because it had the better closet. I moved to the room above the garage, the one with the window that wouldn't seal right, and let the cold in from November through March. Then I made the mistake of getting a scholarship. It was the Kellerman Academic Award, $8,000 toward any accredited program given annually to one student in the county. I applied on my own. I wrote the essay on my own. I got up at 5 a.m. for 3 Saturdays in a row to sit in the school library and revise it because the library opened before the rest of the building and it was the only place warm enough to think. When the letter came, I didn't tell my father. I put it in my backpack and walked around with it for a week because I wanted to keep something that was mine for just a little while. He found it. I still don't know if he was going through my things or if I just left it somewhere visible by accident. It doesn't matter. What matters is the conversation that happened afterward. He sat me down at the kitchen table, Cecilia standing to his left like a second in a duel, and told me that the scholarship money would go toward household expenses because I owed them for the past 2 years of upkeep. He said it like it was simple math, like I was an appliance that had been running up the electric bill. I told him that wasn't legal. He told me that ungrateful was not a quality he admired in a child, and that if I felt so strongly about independence, I was free to pursue it. 3 days later, I was at the Greyhound station with $60 and a duffel bag. I spent the first winter in Akron with a woman named Miss Delphine, who ran a house for displaced teenagers and didn't ask too many questions as long as you kept your corner clean and showed up for meals. I waitressed at a diner on Route 21 and saved every dollar that wasn't going toward the community college application fee. I enrolled in January. I took out every federal loan available to me. I worked nights. I graduated in 2 years with a 3.9 GPA and a letter of recommendation from the county DA's office, where I had been interning for 11 months. By the time I was 26, I was a licensed attorney. By 29, I was a state-level prosecutor in the Financial Crimes Division. I had a husband named Joel who built custom furniture in our garage on weekends and made very good coffee and had never once made me feel like a burden. I had a life, a real one. One I had constructed from scratch on ground that nobody had prepared for me. I had not spoken to my father in 18 years. Then my aunt called, my mother's sister, Bertie, and told me that my father was being honored by the county business council and that there was something I needed to know. Something about a trust. My mother's trust. The one her parents had set up before they died. The one that was supposed to pass to me when I turned 30. Bertie said she had been trying to reach me for 2 years. She said my father had contested the disbursement. He had filed paperwork claiming I had abandoned the family and was therefore ineligible under the terms of the trust. He had found me through my professional license. He knew exactly where I was and what I had built, and he was trying to take the one thing my mother had left me before he could find a way to get to that too. The trust was worth $340,000. Not a fortune, but it was my mother's. She had worked for it, saved it, directed it to me, specifically because she knew. She must have known what kind of man she had married. I had a legal right to it, and my father, who had spent 18 years building his reputation as a civic-minded family man, was counting on me staying invisible. He had miscounted. I told Joel the night before I drove back to Hargrove County. We sat in the kitchen with the overhead light on, and he listened the way he always does, without interrupting, without offering solutions I didn't ask for. When I finished, he asked one question. "Do you want me there?" I said yes. Joel is not a loud man. He doesn't fill a room the way politicians do. What he is thorough. He had spent the previous 4 months, while I was building my legal case with our colleague Marsh, a forensic accountant with a gift for finding things people thought they had buried, quietly pulling public records on Wallace Pruitt's financial history, property transfers, business licenses, a private LLC that had been incorporated 3 months after my mother died, funded with a lump sum that corresponded almost exactly to the liquidation of an investment account she had held jointly with her parents. My mother's money. Move before the ink on the death certificate was dry. We walked into the Whitfield Hotel at 7:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. The gala was already in progress. My father was at the head table, laughing at something the councilwoman to his right had said. His hair silver now, his suit expensive, his whole posture arranged into the performance of a man who had nothing to answer for. He saw me. At the same moment I cleared the inner doors. I watched his face do something I had never seen it do when I was a child. It collapsed. Just for a second. The way a building looks in that fraction of a second after the demolition charge fires and before the structure actually falls. Then he recovered. He straightened. He smiled the smile he had been practicing for 30 years. He excused himself from the table and crossed the room toward me with his arms already opening, already composing the hug, already constructing the narrative of the prodigal child who had come back. "Ava." His voice was warm for the cameras. The name said like an embrace. "I didn't know you were coming." He put his hands on my shoulders and leaned in close, and what came out of his mouth then was not warm at all. "You have no standing here," he said, quiet enough that only I could hear. "Whatever your aunt told you, it's already been handled. The trust disbursement has been legally redirected. You walked away from this family. The paperwork reflects that. Walk back out now and I will not make this embarrassing for you." The 16-year-old version of me knew this voice. It was the voice that had decided things were final. The voice that had informed rather than discussed. The voice that had pointed at the door of the car. But I was not 16. I stepped back out of his grip. Not aggressively. Just far enough to look at him clearly. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said. I'm here because I was invited. The Whitfield is a public venue and the gala is open to county residents. I'm also here because I'm named in a trust dispute that you initiated, and everything I say tonight is being noted by my co-counsel. His smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. I walked past him toward the table where Joel was already seated, having taken 2 chairs near the outer edge of the room, close enough to the dais to be visible, far enough from the head table to watch everything. Marsh was 1 table over, deep in conversation with the woman next to him, his briefcase open at his feet. The program proceeded. There were 3 other honorees before my father. I sat and ate my salmon and listened and waited. When they called his name, Wallace Pruitt walked up to the podium the way men like him always do, like they have already won whatever room they're walking into. He thanked the council. He thanked Cecilia, seated at the head table with her hands folded. He talked about community and legacy and the importance of investing in the next generation. I thought about my mother's cardigan. When the applause died down and the floor was open for remarks, a tradition at this particular gala, one that Bertie had specifically mentioned when she coached me on the format, I stood up. My father saw me stand. I watched him process it. I watched him calculate. I spoke before he could signal anyone. My name is Ava Voss, I said, and my voice carried the way 12 years of courtrooms had taught it to. Formerly Ava Pruitt. I am the biological daughter of tonight's honoree, and I'm a prosecuting attorney with the State Financial Crimes Division. I have a brief statement, if the council will permit it. The room went very still. The gala director, a small woman named Brenda, looked at her program and then at the councilwoman and then back at the program, buying herself time. My father stepped back toward the microphone. This is a private matter, he said, his politician's voice back in full effect. My daughter and I have had some family difficulties. This is not the appropriate venue. I agree that family matters should be handled appropriately, I said. Which is why I'm wondering why you filed a legal motion in February contesting the disbursement of my deceased mother's trust, a motion that claimed I had voluntarily abandoned our family when I was 16 years old. A current moved through the room. Not loud, electrical. You were difficult, he said. His jaw was tight. You made choices. I was a minor, I said, and I was driven to a bus station with $60. Someone near the back made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. My father's eyes moved to Joel, then to Marsh. He was calculating again, trying to assess what I had and what I didn't. He made his decision. Men like him always do when they feel the ground shift. They push harder. The trust, he said, leaning slightly toward the room the way a man does when he wants witnesses, was redirected legally. Your mother, in the final weeks of her illness, updated the beneficiary documentation to reflect the family unit rather than a single estranged individual. I have the paperwork. I filed it correctly. Whatever she is implying, he looked at me with something that was almost pity, is the result of old grievances, not fact. I looked at him for a moment. I thought about tactical patience. I had learned it not in the military, but in 8 years of courtrooms where the person across from you is trying to make you react before you're ready. May I see the document? I asked. He blinked. He had not expected that. I don't carry legal documents to gala, Ava. That's fine, I said. Because I do. I nodded to Marsh. Marsh reached into his briefcase and produced a manila envelope. He handed it to Joel. Joel stood and crossed the room and set it on the table nearest to the podium without a word. That envelope, I said, contains 3 things. The original trust document, certified and notarized, naming me as sole beneficiary. A forensic accounting report showing the transfer of $214,000 from a joint investment account held by my mother and her parents into a private LLC incorporated by my father 3 months after her death, and a signed affidavit from the trust attorney of record stating that he received a phone call from my father's office pressuring him to backdate a beneficiary amendment. The room was not still anymore. The room was breathing fast. My father's face went through several things: anger, calculation, something that I think was the first real fear I had ever seen from him. He grabbed the envelope, he opened it. He looked at the forensic report for a long time. Then he did something I genuinely had not anticipated. He laughed, a short, sharp sound, totally without warmth, the way a bluff sounds when someone decides to double down on a hand they've already lost. "This is speculation," he said. "This is conjecture dressed up in certified paper. None of this proves intent. None of this proves anything a court wouldn't throw out in the first hearing." He held up the forensic report. "This," he said, "is a document produced by a hired accountant paid by my estranged daughter to construct a narrative. It is not evidence, it is an argument." He set it down. "And I have spent 20 years in this county building something real. I am not going to be undone by a woman who left and is only coming back now because she smells money." The room was very quiet. I let the quiet exist for a moment. "You're right that it's not definitive on its own," I said, "which is why I didn't come alone." I looked at the entrance to the ballroom. 2 people walked in. One was a woman in her 60s with white hair and a wool coat. Bertie, my mother's sister, who had driven 4 hours and dressed like she was going somewhere important because she was. The second was a man in a gray suit with a conference badge from the state attorney's office clipped to his lapel. My father looked at the badge. Something left his face entirely. "The affidavit from the trust attorney," I said, "was sufficient to open a formal inquiry. That inquiry has been open for 6 weeks. Tonight was not an ambush, Dad. Tonight was just the most convenient place for you to finally say, out loud, in front of witnesses, exactly what you intended to do with my mother's money." He had said it. On a live microphone? In a room with 400 people and a gala photographer who had been recording the remarks portion of the evening as a matter of course. He had said, "I am not going to be undone by a woman who left and is only coming back because she smells money." He had acknowledged the money. He had acknowledged I had a claim. He had done it while contesting it in a public forum after having legally argued I didn't exist. That was not a small thing. He knew it. I could see him run the calculation in real time. Cecilia stood up from the head table. She was looking at my father with an expression I hadn't expected. Not defensive, not angry, tired. The specific tiredness of someone who has been performing a role for a long time and just watched the curtain get pulled. She sat back down without saying anything. My father straightened. He put the report back in the envelope. He set it on the podium carefully, the way you set something down when you're deciding not to run. "I think," he said, his voice lower now, the performance mostly gone, "this should be handled through the appropriate legal channels." "Agreed," I said. "It already is." I sat down. Joel put his hand on top of mine under the table. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The rest of the gala proceeded in the way that events proceed after something real has happened inside a carefully planned evening. The crystal plaque was presented. Photographs were taken. People ate their dessert and spoke to each other in lower voices than before. My father shook hands and smiled and did everything he had trained himself to do, but the room had shifted in the way rooms do when a story changes mid-telling. Bertie sat with us for the last hour. She held my hand twice. She told me my mother had always known, had always worried, had spent the last 8 months of her life documenting what she could, because she could not undo what she had not protected me from. But she could leave me the tools to protect myself. She hadn't left me the money to give me money. She had left me the record. The formal inquiry concluded 4 months later. The LLC my father had created was found to have been funded through the improper transfer of trust assets. He was required to return $214,000 to the estate with interest. The backdated beneficiary amendment was ruled invalid. The trust disbursed to me in full the following spring. He did not go to prison. That was the part that was hardest to make peace with. The Attorney General's office determined that while his actions constituted civil fraud, the criminal threshold for prosecution was narrow and the evidence of direct intent, though substantial, was not airtight enough for them to move forward in the current cycle. Marsh had opinions about this. So did Joel. So did I. But here is what I know. Wallace Pruitt resigned from the County Business Council 8 days after the gala. No statement. Just a one-paragraph letter to the chair. Cecilia filed for divorce the following month. I don't know what happened between them, and I didn't look. That was her story to live, not mine to watch. I took my mother's trust money and did 2 things with it. Half went into a college fund I set up in her name, awarded annually to a first-generation student from Hargrove County. The other half went toward the down payment on a house with a yard large enough for the garden she had always talked about wanting. I planted it in May. Tomatoes and lavender and 1 rose bush that turned out to be more work than I expected and also exactly worth it. My father tried to call once, 6 weeks after the inquiry closed. He didn't leave a message. I didn't call back. There is a version of this story where I felt peace about that, where the resolution tied off clean and I closed the chapter and moved into the rest of my life without looking over my shoulder. I want to be honest with you, because this is the kind of story that deserves honesty. It's not that clean. There are still Tuesday mornings where I wake up at 5 a.m. for no reason I can name, and the first image in my mind is the back of a car driving away from a bus station in the rain. There are still rooms I walk into where I have to remind myself quietly that I'm allowed to be here. But then I look at the diploma on the wall of my office, the one I framed myself and hung crooked on purpose because it felt more honest that way. I look at the files on my desk. I look at the people I have helped, one quiet case at a time, put language around what was done to them, and hold someone accountable for it. And I think about my mother, who spent the last months of her life doing paperwork so I would have something to stand on. She didn't rescue me. She left me the foundation and trusted me to build. I think that was the greatest thing she could have done.